Welcome, everybody. If you're here to learn more about the Master of Science in Sustainable Energy program at Brown, you're in the right place. We have a lot of great information to share with you, so we'll go ahead and get started with the agenda. My name is Victoria Bray. I'm the Associate Director of Recruitment, and we've got a lot of information to share with you about the School of Engineering, the program, application tips. We'll talk more about the application timeline as well. I have folks from the program here who are going to describe more in detail. So let's get started. Rod, do you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the School of Engineering?
Thanks, Victoria. Hi, everybody. I'm Rod Beresford. I'm a professor in the School of Engineering. Got a research background in electronic materials and devices. I'm also a professional engineer in the power systems area and kind of the driving force behind this program and part of the initiative for sustainable energy at Brown. The pictures you're seeing on this slide give you a little bit of a sense of our facilities in the school. On the left is the Brown Design Workshop, is a makerspace that's open not just to School of Engineering and all the other departments at Brown, but also the surrounding community. So this is a great hub for prototyping and testing and designing and all kinds of fabrication facilities. You can see also the Hazeltine Commons there and the cafe space. A lot of students gather and congregate in the school, whether they're engineers or computer scientists or others. And there's an example classroom. So if you come to Brown, you have access to these types of facilities, and of course, the very close mentoring and advising of this brand new master's program in sustainable energy. Back to you, Victoria.
Awesome, thanks. So from the top, we just want to sort of run through the admission requirements and the application process. So first and foremost, all of our School of Engineering programs have a holistic review process. So what that means is we're looking at every aspect of your application in order to evaluate your candidacy for admission. And another important note is, as you're navigating the application and considering how to enter in your information and present yourself, keep in mind that the audience for your application is folks from the School of Engineering, folks from the Sustainable Energy program. So as you're crafting your personal statement, asking for your letters of recommendation, I think that's a really important detail to keep in mind. For your application to be considered complete, we need transcripts from everywhere you've attended after secondary school. So though if you have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, two bachelor's degrees, you transferred institutions, just make sure that you're providing us with all of the transcripts from every institution that you've attended after high school. For the purposes of your application, you can submit an unofficial transcript. You do not need a credential evaluation if you have a degree from an institution outside of the United States. However, if you do end up being admitted and matriculating, eventually we will have you follow up with both an official transcript and if you attended an institution outside of the United States, a credential evaluation that'll include degree conferral. But we're talking about the application, right? In order for your application to be complete, we just need those unofficial transcripts everywhere you've attended after secondary school. We also require three letters of recommendation. So those three letters of recommendation can come from professional or academic sources. Uh, Really important that you're asking for all three letters of recommendation if you're an external candidate from Brown University. We can't make decisions on files or review applications that are incomplete. So that third letter of recommendation, I know I get a lot of questions. Can I just submit two really good ones? We really need all three in order to be able to review your application. You should really be asking folks who know you really well, folks who can speak to you highly, speak to your candidacy for this program in particular. So folks who can speak to you, who've taught you in the classroom, who've had you in engineering coursework if you have an engineering background, folks who can really talk about you, take your background and sort of let us know why they think that you would be a good candidate for a master's program, and in particular, a good candidate for a master's program in sustainable energy. On the professional end, that might be somebody who's supervised you, who's managed you, who's worked on projects with you, who can speak to your work in that way as well. We're going to have you submit a personal statement. The personal statement should really be a highly polished document. It's the really only opportunity that we have to hear directly from you. Really make sure that you're talking about your interest in the program, how you feel like the program is going to help you meet your goals, why you're interested in Brown. Those are all important things that we should be gleaning from that personal statement. Your resume or your CV will help outline your work experience, your research experience, your skills, sort of get a sense of you out of the classroom, in research areas, in a professional environment, so we can get a solid sense of sort of, from your personal statement, from your letters of recommendation, really helping us tell that story of your background and how the program can help you meet your professional and academic goals. You do not need to submit GRE scores. We don't require them as a part of the application process. However, we will review them if you do submit your GRE scores. So if you've taken the test, that's great. We encourage you to submit them and we'll take them into consideration in our holistic review process. We have a couple of upcoming deadlines to keep in mind. Our priority deadline has passed. We're now looking at our regular decision deadline. So that regular deadline is going to be April 1st. You have up until 2 weeks after that deadline in order to complete your application. So make sure that you're submitting by April 1st, regardless of whether or not you have those letters of recommendation in hand. Those letters of recommendation can come in up to 2 weeks after the application deadline passes. Um, these apply to fall entry. Some of our engineering programs have a spring entry option, which I'm happy to answer questions about that if it comes up. But really, right now we're looking at fall 2026. Here are those deadlines again, so you can see what those spring deadlines looked like last year. An important note here for spring, we call it an international student deadline. That's really just because we want to make sure that we're giving our international students ample time to go through the visa process, right? So we try to build that into our timelines as much as possible because we have a little bit more time for fall. Use that April 1 deadline regardless of whether or not you're an international student or a domestic student. Some more information about that personal statement and recommendation letters. We talked about this a little bit more, but again, I feel like it bears repeating. It's the only opportunity you have to show us original work. And part of that is really us assessing, are your communication skills and writing skills up to what we need them to be in order to communicate and function in a Brown master's program. So I think that really just goes to say, make sure that you're spending time with it, make sure that you're proofreading it, make sure that you're answering the questions that we're asking as a part of the personal statement. And that'll really help us get an understanding of, are you following directions? Are you communicating in an impactful way? Are you telling a story in an impactful way? And that goes a long way for the admission committee. Describing any work experience you have, relating that to the program, relating any academic experience, research experience that you have to the program really helps that admission committee get an understanding of, what type of work are you going to do as a master's student? And then after the program ends, how can we help you meet those professional goals that you have when you graduate? For letters of recommendation should really come from somebody who can speak to you more than just, this person got an A in my class, right? It should be much more detailed than that. This person got an A in my class and they're an excellent member of our classroom community for these reasons. They worked on these projects that had this impact on the classroom community. Those are the types of things that we're wanting to hear about in letters of recommendation. There might be a little bit of coaching that you need to do on your end for your recommenders to really be able to understand that. So encouraging you to just make sure that when you're asking for letters of recommendation, that you're also providing your CV or your resume, your personal statement, and also information about the program. I'm sending them a link to our graduate program finder page so they can craft a letter that really talks about you specifically and your success in the program. Here are some dates to keep in mind for the upcoming cycle. For fall, we have an orientation that happens in August. So generally the way that it works is, we'll invite students to campus mid to late August for a fall start program. Then we'll have that first semester ending in December. We have a finals period through the first part of December, come back in January, and then finals happen in May, and then commencement May 30th. So I'll hand things over to Rod to talk more in detail about the program.
Thanks, Victoria. And again, welcome to everyone who's listening in here. I'm going to try to give you a sense of the context and motivation for this program, and then also some details of what the curriculum looks like now, and what you would be experiencing and learning about if you come study here. And we will end in time for you to ask some questions, particular things you want to hear some more about. And I want to also emphasize I'm available for questions one-on-one through Zoom. And please reach out if you'd like to discuss either your particular situation or specific questions that didn't get raised and answered during this info session. Eager to hear from you, very happy to. This slide is providing an overall context. You've probably seen this or something like it. To the left on this graph is the picture of the increase in global surface temperature over the previous decades. That period of time really representing, my career, my whole professional experience. And to the right, in these gray and other shaded areas, are some possible trajectories that you all are going to experience as you grow, participate in the workforce, and help sculpt and shape the energy system of the future. And with any luck and with your talents and efforts, we're going to bend that over and move towards ultimately a net zero energy system. So that's the motivation for a program like this, where we're going to try to bring together a class that's eager to get engaged with this work, and needs kind of that shot, take to the next level, to be able to enter the workforce in a meaningful and impactful way. Let's go to the next slide. So why do it at Brown? We have a tremendous campus community. The thing that I'm highlighting in this slide is that our recent initiative for sustainable energy is drawing existing faculty from primarily engineering and the physical sciences. So that would be physics, chemistry, and earth science, that have been working in this area, but are now kind of banded together to provide sort of a more comprehensive and impactful focus and program on campus. Part of our goal and our mandate is to interact and collaborate with other institutes and centers at Brown. And principal one is the Institute of Brown for Environment and Society. We call it IBIS. There's a lot of great climate science, social science on climate impacts and resilience, things like that. But really, all across our campus, we have great faculty who are working on different aspects of these problems, including, Climate Solutions Lab at the Watson School. This is efforts of political scientists, economists, policy experts, and others. So if you're coming to Brown, one of our great strengths is this access across all the disciplines, and that's part of our drive with this program, is to make those links. To the next one, please. Next slide. So I now want to give a little more specific background in the energy space, and some of you, may know some of this. I've had about the past 6 years that I've been focused pretty intently on this, tracking both the policy changes and, of course, the technology and the build out and the sort of the current issues. So I just want to give a flavor of that, and then we'll be moving into sort of more specifics about the program. So this slide is referencing some really major and kind of unprecedented level of federal investment that happened under the previous administration, Biden administration. These four acts represented a very large infusion of different kinds of funds, whether it's loans or tax credits and different kinds of incentives, much of which was directed at the energy system. Let's go to the next slide. And the big one was called IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, which really was about the clean energy transition. This slide is referring to some of the impacts that we saw out of that in the first 1 to 2 years after that was enacted. And it has a tremendous amplifying effect, because what this federal funding does is take risk out of possible clean energy projects or other types of major infrastructure projects. And that de-risking, or providing some certainty for project success, allows the private sector actors to really come in and move capital. And of course, this is a huge and long-term problem that we're talking about. It's not going to be solved by a little bit of government spending here and there. It's going to be solved by massive investments across the economy, with all kinds of private sector actors playing important roles. So you may be thinking or worried about the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill last year, which really kind of took a hammer to a lot of these programs. And that's true. There's no denying that that has caused some tremors in those markets, some projects getting either stalled or canceled. However, there's a couple of things to bear in mind. One, that some of these incentives and tax credits and so on are not over yet. There's a deadline in place. These things are going to end, and the fact that they're still there with a deadline out there is causing a lot of firms to really accelerate what they're doing in order to take advantage of it. So, kind of ironically, the efforts to sort of claw back are leading to an uptick in investment currently. Um, the other point to keep in mind is we are a system, an energy system of, 50 states. There are energy offices and mandates and programs and, incentives and all of this in every one of those. The state energy office, where if you're in California, is a huge enterprise, is an example of a place you might go to work as an engineer, as an analyst, as a program manager, and be very active. So the point that the federal investment is going through changes doesn't mean that the states are stopping what they're doing. And in fact, quite the opposite. There's a tremendous amount of activity. So that's where we are. That's where we're directing our focus. Let's go to the next slide. And here's an example of what people are talking about today. I'm going to give just a couple more slides that's sort of setting the stage. For a long time, the growth in electricity demand has been pretty flat or gradually growing, and you can see the last several decades there to the left on that chart. And right now, the forecasts are looking remarkably bright, and a lot of this is electrification, meaning seeking to use electricity in end use sectors that previously were fossil fuels. And big ones there are home and commercial heating and transportation, light duty and medium duty vehicle transportation. But in addition to electrification, there is right now a very big surge in data center interest and activity. And you can hardly read the news without coming across something about that. I'm going to say a little bit more about that. But so this is an interesting moment for us as a country, as an energy system. We are once again in need of major build out, and that really hasn't happened since the 1960s and 1970s, when we largely completed the existing high voltage transmission grid. So this is a very interesting period of new investment needed, lots of demand coming, forecast and coming, and how are we going to respond? Let's go to the next slide. Here's a beautiful map that just came out last year from NREL, which you may not have noticed, but the name has been changed. So NREL is now NLR, the National Lab of the Rockies. And this map is picturing existing and proposed data center location and size. So size of those bubbles, the yellow and white bubbles there are showing the size of in terms of power consumption of these data centers. There's also this crazy network you're seeing is both the optical fiber backbone and the high voltage transmission corridors. And of course, you need both if you're going to build a data center. So this is kind of a nice in one visual of the tremendous amount of capacity that's there right now. And these white, if you look at these white bubbles, these are proposed data centers, which are truly massive expansions of this. And so this is causing some very interesting conversations because a lot of this is happening in the context of these new loads, these very big electrical loads are being proposed right alongside of new generation. And in the past, those have always been two separate sort of procedures and two separate groups and two separate, policy pathways, if you will. So these are now kind of getting mashed together in this very, very exciting way. Let's go to the next slide. In terms of how the grid is responding to all this, California is one of the leaders, but there are other states that are in this vanguard. Texas, Massachusetts, Illinois, and others are coming along. But this is from actually already almost a couple of years ago now. But this was a day in April in California where the single largest contribution to the grid, and it was in the evening hour, is battery storage. So this represents a real kind of turning point for solar, which is, it's the intermittency of solar has meant that it's very difficult to integrate in the grid. But when coupled with battery storage, you've got effectively a dispatchable, renewable resource. And you can see that the impact that it's having already. California, as a sort of, if you consider it as a state energy system, is going to be the electricity grid is going to be 100% renewable sometime in the next few years. There are many days already right now where you have times of 100% renewable electricity. So this is real. This can be done. The engineering is happening. You know, people are able to do this. Part of it is the will to do it, but there's also a lot of work to integrate to build this. All right, let's go to the next slide. I don't want to spend too long on all this. We're going to get to some of the details of the program. Energy Outlook, annual energy outlook comes out from EIA. That's an office of the Department of Energy each year. And the next one, the 2026 one, will be out in spring. That's what they've said. So it's usually probably just, another month or so. And this is a very important annual exercise that looks at existing policy, not, where people want to be or think we should be, but what's in place today and what can we forecast for the coming years all the way out to 2050, sort of based on our current pathway. And I'll reference this in some of the further things we look at. Next slide, please. So let's now dig in a bit to the program, given that context and that motivation. So major changes happening in our energy system. We would like to see you come to Brown, develop the kind of understanding that it's not just a narrow technical specialty, which you probably have something already, whether it's on the engineering or economics or something else. But in addition, to have a breadth of view of this entire system and how it functions in society, how it's regulated, how it contributes, and and what it costs. So that kind of cross-disciplinary understanding is really essential, I think, to be a desirable employee, but also to be, a sort of a functional and highly effective contributor, to be able to work across teams that have all those viewpoints. So part of how we're going to do that is in our coursework and the projects you do here, you'll engage with the analysis and simulation modeling of the energy system in a way that's consistent with how people are doing it in think tanks, in consultancies, in state energy offices, in federal labs, and so on. And at the same time, so while you're here, this is just a one-year program. There's a lot to do, but at the same time, we want you to deepen the disciplinary expertise that you have, or possibly, build a new one. That's also would be fair game. And tell us about that when you apply. What is your goal in terms of bringing new skills into your toolkit? Let's go to the next slide. So to get more specific in terms of what are our students doing today, and right now this current academic year is the very first year of Sustainable Energy SCM at Brown. So if you join in fall 26, you'd be in the second year, but it's really your year would be kind of the first full cohort. This year is a bit of a soft start, but it's 2 semesters, 4 courses, and the way we've structured it is there are 3 courses that everyone's required today. So 3 requirements, if you will. And there's a course in sustainable energy science and technology, which covers the foundational technologies of renewable energy generation. It's taught typically by chemical engineers, and environmental engineers could also be, very functional there. A second course, which I'm currently teaching, electrification and decarbonization, which is all about grid, taking carbon out of the electricity supply, and then using that, clean energy or green energy, whatever you want to call it, to decarbonize end use applications. The third required course is something from the economics and policy of energy transitions. And you can see in red on this slide are the several courses that we are offering as choices for students this year. And in fact, we're very flexible in sort of in everything at Brown, but I'm flexible in terms of what you might choose to propose as an econ or policy course that meets the program requirement. And in fact, Right now, we are also in the process of searching for a new hire, a faculty member teaching in this program, who very likely will be creating a course in that space as well, in the policy of the transition. So that's three out of eight are are spoken for, if you will. Like we want everyone to do that. And then the remaining five, we say at least three of those should relate to your focus area. And you should tell us, what is your focus area? What do you want to work in? What do you want to contribute to? And it can be narrow, it can be broad. It needs to be relevant to this program. Obviously, it should be something that you have some background in so that you're able to make a meaningful progress in that. But otherwise, you literally can look across the entire Brown curriculum for courses that would be relevant to your focus area. If we go to the next slide, please, let's show you some of examples. So this is not a restriction. This is not saying these are the two focus areas that you can have. There are many. It's really up to you. But this is an example. Like if you want to focus on energy conversion processes, here are a bunch of courses that you could be considering to build that focus area. And likewise with economics and policy, here's some examples of courses you could be considering. And you will be talking to your advisor if you come to Brown, about how to structure your program. And then those last two, which are just considered free electives, it's really up to you. And it can be anything, but it could be a chance for you, for example, to do an independent study, which is very common at Brown. You find a faculty advisor whose work you're interested in is willing to supervise you in a reading course or a project course, and that's negotiated with individual faculty. Okay, so I've told you about three required courses. I've told you about a focus area, and a little bit about, I hope, about the flavor of the Brown environment it's very interdisciplinary. We have a rather porous boundaries between departments. In the School of Engineering, for example, there are no departments. We have faculty groupings that tackle different disciplinary areas, that run the various undergrad programs, or in this case, graduate programs. But it's really quite easy to work across those boundaries. Okay, please, to the next slide. This is just giving a little more depth and color to what are in those required courses. And this was the first course I mentioned, which is on the foundations of renewable energy generation. You can see that there's some basic thermodynamics assumed, but these courses are not primarily, derivation and engineering analysis courses. These are abstracted up a bit to techno and economics, to scalability, externalities. These are factors that matter when you're trying to actually build a system. So you're bringing the engineering knowledge into the real world, if you will, and what do we have to deal with to make that real, to make that actually come to fruition. And you can see in this version of the course this year, the second half of the semester, the students were selecting particular technologies and presenting several times to the class about those aspects like scalability, techno-economics, and so on. So there's a lot of feedback, not just from the faculty member, but from the class discussion. And part of the grading, part of the assessment there was the students should be incorporating that feedback and coming back next week, for the next installment, if you will. Let's go to the next slide. Here's a famous diagram. These are called Sankey diagrams, a flow chart. This shows the U.S. energy system as of 2023, data from one of our national labs, Lawrence Livermore National Labs. And this picture, you can very quickly judge where are the big opportunities for decarbonization. And I'm saying focus on electricity generation. That's a box kind of in the middle, the upper middle. We're going to squeeze out natural gas and coal, and that's going to be done by growing the renewable share, the solar, hydro, wind, and that box, that box becomes progressively decarbonized. Then when you look to the right at those four pink boxes, the major end use sectors, again, you can see getting natural gas out of the residential, commercial, and industrial heat applications and getting oil out of the transportation sector. So we know what we're trying to do here. Electrification of vehicles, electrification of residential building heating. Let's go to the next slide. That's all that I'm describing is the subject matter of my course on electrification and decarbonization. Again, giving you a flavor of some of the detail that's in there. And in particular, I'm structuring the course so that each one of the major modules we have at our disposal, the students are going to be using some open source tools that are very widely used in industry and analysis in order to understand how the energy system analysis, energy modeling is actually done. And so these projects give you a way to make a choice about things that you want to work on. And part of that is like a case study exercise in this course, but part of that is also where are you going to go with this after Brown? Like, what do you want to be able to do and how to present yourself as, an experienced energy analyst, and how could that contribute to your next job, your next position? Okay, next slide. I'm showing this just to say that the way the energy system will look in 2050 is anyone's guess. Of course, no one knows for sure. But using that annual energy outlook, and which I mentioned at the top, here's what the current outlook is for 2050. And honestly, I mean, there's not as much progress as you would like to see, and I think I show this just to raise the point that there is always, opportunity and challenge, and by this measure, we might be looking at 50% renewables in the electricity sector, and actually, fairly modest progress in decarbonizing those end use sectors with actually not very much progress in transportation. Is that really what's going to happen? And I would urge all of you to think about coming to Brown to learn and practice how to accelerating decarbonization. Let's go to the next slide. These are some, again, sort of detailed bullets that could fill out courses that we're working on developing in the econ and policy area. And I say it that way because, originally we intended to hire for these courses this year, but the various program approvals didn't happen in time. And so that's kind of now current, as I mentioned, we're bringing in a new faculty member, and this gives you a sample of the kinds of things we're looking for in that person who would be at Brown teaching this when you come in, if you come in the fall. Let's go to the next slide. And these, by the way, you have all these slides, um, access to these slides after the session. So I want to give just a little bit more sense of what's happening in the teaching right now, like in the classroom. We are looking at stuff that happens day in and day out, sort of real time. These stories are evolving. We are worried about and focused on what we're reading about each day and the progress or lack of progress on these questions. This story was kind of a big blow up a summer ago, year ago, and you can see, without going into all the details, you can see that what happened was something that cost $2 billion one year, the very next year cost over $14 billion, and that's the kind of change that gets people really upset. And I'm sure you read in the news about concerns over energy prices, concerns over affordability generally. And the second bullet on this slide is pointing out a number 286 gigawatts. That may not mean something specific to you, but that is an enormous quantity of energy supply that what we're saying here is this is waiting to come online. These are projects that would like to connect to the grid to be able to supply energy to our needs. And this amount, if that happened, I mean, that would be something like an increase of 50% in the generating capacity of the country. So that's a kind of a crazy figure, and it represents in part a lot of obstacles and blocks in the process. So the policy and the management of the interconnection queue, as it's called, is where the projects get studied to be allowed to connect to the grid, full of problems. So that's one of the things we're tracking. Go to the next slide, please. And, in the kind of the not quite as immediate, but sort of more in that longer time horizon, how do we understand how to plan for the future of the energy system? And I'm referencing here REEDS. This is a system again out of NREL. But the electricity grid is a major piece of that, being able to project out like what capacity will get built, what would the impact of that be, and how do we do that cost effectively? And so these figures are just representing to you kind of a level of complexity on the right. That's our local area, the ISO New England, the independent system operator in New England. Providence, of course, is sort of in the center and the bottom on that picture, but that's showing you the transmission grid, the high voltage transmission grid in New England. And simulating that is a big enough challenge. Doing it at the level of the entire US for this kind of capacity planning study, is a major undertaking. So there's a lot of great engineering work and great opportunities to study what's coming. All right, so we need to move on. I don't want to close out without leaving you some time for questions. I think this is my last one, but just to point to some of the technology that we need for the future that we don't have today. Many things we do have, and as you saw, there's lots of projects, in the ground projects still being planned and so on. But something that is going to make a big difference in the future is long duration energy storage. So we can now there's 4 hour batteries, 8 hour, 10 hour batteries. This is these things are possible. These are being built and these are playing a role in the grid today. But being able to get across multi days and more to seasonal energy storage is kind of the next frontier. And so this is just referencing that. And so, if your interest is more on the research side and the future of these problems, this is the kind of thing you might want to focus on for that. Okay, I think I'm going to pass off again. The next slide we can't skip this one. I'm sorry. I just don't want to spend too much time here. But just to close on this one, we do have a lot of research at Brown. I think at this point, over 25 faculty who are specifically core faculty of this initiative in sustainable energy, another 40 plus faculty who are affiliated to the initiative. If research is your interest, there is the chance to connect with faculty groups while you're here. It's challenging in part because it's a very short timeline. We're having you on campus for just 2 semesters. You're doing 8 courses, so you're quite busy with that work. But I would certainly encourage you, if you're interested, to reach out to specific faculty if you want to learn more about their work and whether you could plug in if you come to Brown. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Victoria. Thanks for listening, and I'm eager to hear more from you, your questions, and reaching out if you'd like to.
Awesome. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the services that we have for master's students at Brown, specifically in the sphere of career and professional development. So we have these layers of support. You've got folks in the School of Engineering who are really familiar with the industry, professors of the practice, student affairs staff. Tori's on the call in the background, letting folks in from their waiting room and answering Q&A stuff. She's just one example of many folks who are there to help you connect you with vital Brown resources and really set you up for success with the program. That starts with the Division of Masters and Professional Programs, which houses all of the resources for master's students at Brown, the School of Engineering, and then Brown at large. And you can see sort of the areas that we're assisting students both online and in person and the skills that you can help build as a part of our program. Career and professional development is definitely a crucial part of our master's curriculum. The master's career and professional development is really housed in the Division of Masters and Professional Programs through the Center for Master Student Excellence. I'd encourage you to take a look at our master's career website for more information. We have STEM-specific career advising. We have everything from crafting a resume, cover letter, optimizing your LinkedIn profile, all the way to negotiating a salary. And these resources are available to to after you graduate as well. You get connected with our Brown alumni through Alumni Connect. The alumni are open to folks reaching out to them. You can sort by industry, you can sort by job title, things like that. So, really, a lot in the way of master specific resources, which I think really sets Brown apart in the landscape of programs in the United States. And then here are some of the career paths for our sustainable energy students that we've crafted. The program is really new, it's young, which is fantastic, but it's really been crafted with an eye towards helping our students really do a lot of that impactful work that Rod was talking about earlier. And then here are some of sort of those career paths we've crafted the curriculum around. So here are some folks who are here to help you. Of course, you've heard from myself, Rod, Tori's on the call, but we have a whole cadre of folks in the School of Engineering who are there to help. Brown in Providence, Rhode Island, you can see this really great picture of part of our campus on the screen. Definitely a great place to attend school, even if it's just for 2 years and you sort of find yourself somewhere else afterwards, but also a great place to stay. So that being said, I think we're ready to start taking some questions. Folks, we can have folks raise their hand, come off mute this is a meeting, so we'd love to see you face to face. But also feel free to use the chat to submit any questions, and we're happy to answer them that way as well.
There's
I
actually, sorry, I didn't mean
No,
to
go ahead.
interrupt. There was
No, go ahead.
actually one question that's been in the Q&A. Somebody is asking about if there's a PhD program after master's.
Oh, okay. So we do not specifically have a PhD in sustainable energy. However, we have PhD programs in the School of Engineering and in the other departments. And you could, if your interest it were to continue at Brown in a PhD, that would certainly be possible. But that would be an additional application and being admitted to that program. It could, depending on your background, that could be in one of the engineering disciplines, electrical and computer or chemical engineering or what have you, mechanical engineering. It could be in another department, but again, you would be applying to PhD. So as I think I mentioned, there's something on the order of 25 faculty who have research that's specifically focused in these energy topics. So yeah, hope that helps clarify.
Fantastic. So I am just now um, grabbing the list of questions that were asked in advance of the session. One thing that I want to talk about that somebody asked in their registration submission is about the landscape of funding for master's students at Brown. And I'll start by saying the majority of our master's students are self-funded. The funding that exists for master's students, merit scholarships, need-based scholarships, really varies from program to program. There are a lot of employment opportunities on campus. Our master's students have the ability to apply for those positions. The vast majority of those positions are going to be paid on an hourly basis. It's not going to be like a TA or an RA stipend like you might see for a PhD program. So that's sort of the general landscape of funding for our master's students. Rod, is there anything specific to sustainable energy that you wanted to cover?
No, we don't at this point have any program specific reserves that could be deployed that way, unfortunately. And I realize that's, it's challenging and that's, we understand that. We respect the pressures that you're facing. The one thing I do want to mention is Rhode Island has a program. This is not a Brown program, but a state of Rhode Island program called the Clean Energy Internships. And if you are attending a Rhode Island institution, whether for undergrad or master's, you're eligible to seek an internship through that. And some of our students have done that, both undergrads and master's students. And the reason this is an attractive option in cases is if you're placed in an internship through that, the state of Rhode Island is covering covering your pay. That is the company that's looking to hire is getting that benefit. So it can be an attractive situation. However, let's be realistic. You have a limited time given the demands of your studies. But as I said, we do have students who have done that, and it's an opportunity to start being impactful in this area, even while you're still at Brown.
Another question is sort of what is our target cohort size? And then I also think, talking about how many graduate students we have in the School of Engineering.
Yeah. So right now, as you heard, this program is young. We're still in a growth phase, so we have not reached capacity. And capacity for this program, at least as current, as it's currently configured, would be between 20 and 30. So we are not there yet. And the cohort size in next fall, I can't say for sure. I'm hopeful that it's 10 to 15. But again, that would not be our capacity. And this is important to you because it means if you apply and you are admissible, meaning you have the background skills and that your record has persuaded us you can do the work and be, and be admitted, you will be. So this is not a case like I'm sure Brown undergrad, the selectivity is some low single digits percentage number. It's extremely daunting. This is different because, in part because, as I say, we're not yet at capacity. So we'll be looking at your record. Do we think that you've got the appropriate background that you can benefit from this and contribute to this? And then we'd be looking forward to admitting you. So I hope that's a positive, in the equation, given where we are now. And I think many Brown programs are small. We're an interesting institution that way. This program is you're going to have a lot of close interaction with your peers. You're going to have very close mentoring and advising by your faculty. Even if we got to capacity, it's not going to be a huge program. To grow beyond that, would require more resources in terms of faculty and staff. So I mean that's where we are today and for the foreseeable future.
And I think to your point, like, we are made up of, I think, a lot of smaller master's programs, even the School of Engineering. So,
Yeah.
with having sustainable energy, having around 30, the School of Engineering has, around 200 master's students. So, between sustainable energy, mechanical engineering, electrical computer engineering, right, you're part of a larger ecosystem of graduate students within the School of Engineering that you can sort of leverage for your education. But James, do you have a question you wanted to ask?
Yeah, so I was just um, my main question was more around the structure for students who are continuing professional work while enrolled, and kind of wondering how flexible the courses are in terms of scheduling them in a way that accommodates that. I know some institutions do evening courses, so just kind of wondering about that structure.
Yeah, I understand the question. We are anticipating in this program that most students are coming from either right out of undergrad or maybe have worked for a couple of years but are coming back to campus. So it is designed as a residential program, full-time study on campus. So I think it's going to be challenging to be trying to work full-time, or working a significant schedule while doing this. There are other programs at Brown that cater to executive or working professionals, and those programs I think would be the sort of flexibility that you're referencing, where some of the teaching may be online. The residential sessions are either very compressed or in off hours. So yeah, I hope I'm answering the question. This one is really it's intended that you're going to be on campus and be available. So yeah, I don't think it would be very easy to be full-time employed and pursuing this program.
All right. Any other questions that folks have?
I think there's another question in the chat. So this,
Yeah, I think we answered it. The program doesn't have a fully online option.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. I think someone's got the hand
Yeah.
raised.
Shivanjali, I'm so sorry if I just mispronounced your last name, but feel free to unmute if you have a question.
Hello, good evening. I'm Shivanjali, and thank you. I'd like to ask my question to Dr. Mr. Rod. So on the website, I found that there is a required credit for the course Policy and Economics of Energy Transition. So I am an Indian, but I'm brought up in the UAE. So if I were to finish my sustainable energy course from Bound and come back to either the Middle East or Asia, how do you think the study that I do, that is based on US data and US regulations, would put me ahead or behind of my peers here?
Yeah, I think I understand your question. So, the required course could be satisfied by many possible choices here in our curriculum. So one answer might be, if that's your specific goal, that you would look for something that you can study in the School of International and Public Affairs that would be more directly relevant to your region. That's possible. The other thing I'd say is, yes, we are, this program is based in, obviously, and focused on U.S. energy system. Um, it's kind of a special case. Many places are different, but there's also a lot of commonality, common knowledge, and increasingly, technology and practice is global and ideas are moving across boundaries, and people do as well. So I I don't think it's necessarily that big of a contrast or a drawback. If you've developed some expertise in the U.S. system and then you want to go work um, somewhere else. So I think it would be incumbent on you as a student to articulate your goal, to be conversant, to be knowledgeable, to be qualified, to go work in this other context, this global context. And then we would talk about, like, how can you get there? What would be the best courses to take to help you do that? And um, yeah, I think you would have to look at where else could I take a program that has this kind of coverage. I mean, there are many things, the US isn't a leader in everything, but there are many things that are happening very rapidly in the US, more rapidly than elsewhere. And, that's not true of everything. I mean, y- you certainly, we've fallen behind in terms of build out of solar and wind. China is way ahead in that. But when you look at, sort of the organization of the grid and these new issues with data center and large load connections, and the policy landscape in the U.S. is quite interesting. So I don't know. I'm just trying to give you some perspective that it may be, there. I don't think there's one answer. Like, it's better to do it here or do it there. I think there's a lot on offer here in the U.S. here at Brown, and we could help you. We could help you find a good choice.
Thank you, sir. That does answer my question.
Okay.
Anybody else want to ask a question?
Could I just reiterate, I'm happy to hear from you. If you'd like to reach out by email, and we can talk 101, or you can get an email response to specific questions, and it'd be my pleasure to hear from you. And thanks for attending. I hope you can take away from this and something of value, and perhaps you'll apply to Brown.
And I just put my email address in the chat. I'm happy to forward any requests along to Rod to connect. So just feel free to use me as a first point of contact, and I can make that connection for folks. So that being said, thank you, everybody. And thanks, Rod and Tori. I really appreciate your assistance, and have a great rest of your night.
Thanks, Victoria. Thank you all. Take
Bye,
care.
everyone. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you.